Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much for checking in on our first Wednesday. And this is our last first Wednesday for the break here of this semester, anyways. And we'll have to talk and see what our summer plans are. Right? We haven't, I'm not sure that we've talked that far just yet, but we've really been enjoying these opportunities. We've kind of centered around some key topics here in the next gen ministry world. And today, as we are recognizing this semester coming to an end means that summer is right on our doorstep. And I know the college semester ends a little earlier than a lot of school semesters, although I think in a lot of places down south those your school years are starting to end too. I don't know, up where we're at in New York, we still go through the end of June, but I think a lot of schools start ending in May here, right? When Jesse, when do the school districts in your area start to wrap
Well,
up?
in my locality in Virginia, it is like mid June, early June,
Okay.
but I think that is slowly changing to
Yeah.
late May. And you're right. There's schools
Yeah.
in other parts of the country. Yeah, they're finishing in mid May,
Yeah.
or maybe
My
even early
sister's
May.
down in my sister and her family's down in North Carolina, and I think they've got like 2 weeks of
Uh
school left. Of
huh.
course,
Yeah.
they start way earlier, obviously, than we do as well. Anyways, all that to say is there I think there's some unique opportunities during a summer season. And I know different youth groups, different children's ministries, different churches sometimes have different rhythms during the summer. But I think in Next Gen Ministries, thinking about how to be intentional with the summer season is a worthy conversation to have, because something obviously very unique happens in the life of students during a summer session, and that is that they don't have school any longer. And so, whether you're a church that or an organization that has midweek services for family services, maybe I know some organizations take breaks during the summer because people's schedules are crazy, or whether you're an organization that typically only gathers on a Sunday morning, what for kids experiences or youth things like that. I think there's some really unique ways that we can start to look at the summer season because of the margin and availability of students and kind of talk through that. Hey Josh, good to see you, my man. It looks like you're surviving all of the big changes that are happening in your life.
Oh yeah, yeah. I'm still here. I'm still trying to
Awesome.
get on. So I made
Awesome.
it.
Hey, today's topic, we're gonna be talking about the kind of taking advantage of the summer schedule, the unique summer schedule that have, and maybe even a little bit, it'd be helpful to talk through um things that, as the point leader, what do we need to be thinking about? Because a lot of times we have our own vacations and ins and outs. And so thinking through maybe even
Huh?
some of the practical stuff related to how to keep sustaining things if you're going to be gone for a little while. Or even one of the things that I'll be proposing we'll talk about here is how camp affects summer schedules and things like that. And so, Jesse, why don't you get us started? When you take a look, and you can certainly speak to any spectrum of next gen ministry, but I know your focus area is in kids ministries, but as you think of a summer coming up in ministry, what are some of the cogs that start rolling, and maybe you start thinking of this stuff, at the in January, preparing for a summer season. But what are some of the things that you need to start be thinking about with the change of the schedule with students' summer schedules?
Yeah, I know in the children's ministry world, it's like there's two major summer events. There's VBS and there's camp.
Yeah.
And like that's a lot of there's a lot of focus and effort and energy put into those 2 weeks. And some churches they've been doing VBS for years, and
Mhm.
and a lot of people volunteer and they serve both their own congregational kids and kids of the community. And so that's a big deal. Some churches are taking a alternative route and doing like an evening VBS, or
Mhm.
trying to change it up a little bit. But yeah, a lot of energy is poured into those two things. And summer camp, of course, too, is just a traditionally a very historic, meaningful time for kids to get away, unplug and meet with Jesus. And a lot of kids have very deep spiritual encounters at summer camp. So
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
I think rightly so, a lot of churches put energy into summer camp as well. But then I think there's also and yeah, the planning of that starts a year in advance, right? And leading up to that, and then but then there's always the fear that like everybody goes on vacation and everybody leaves, and you're never going to see them again until September. Like, and that's a challenge for sure. I'd love to hear your thoughts on how to keep those families engaged, how to stay in touch with those families that you feel like just drop off the map, and also, yeah, how to make the most of VBS and camp. But I'm also interested in hearing about like what are some creative out of the box ideas that churches can do for kids or youth beyond VBS and camp.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Uh, um, when obviously one of the things as far as the unique schedule of summer is availability, right? So as you start thinking, okay, how do we take advantage of the availability of students, and obviously there's a very big difference between the availability of kids and kids ministries and teenagers as it relates to transportation, as it relates to like their ability to get certain places and the free time that they have, those sorts of things. Obviously, teenagers, some of them start working and stuff like that during the summer. But I guess we're kind of presenting this question because the idea is we should kind of try to capture some of that time. And maybe in some different ways than you do during the school year. Maybe I think the school year provides some built-in opportunities because you've got school events that kids are participating in, whether it be band stuff or sporting events, things like that, some natural kind of check-in points. But I have found if I'm not intentional during the summer will evaporate so quickly. One, because as an adult and a dad and a parent, my summer ticks along pretty quickly, and I've got my own kids and all the things that are going on in their life, and so really thinking intentional about what our summer should look like and what the schedule could look like. So certainly, as you mentioned, as it relates to like camp and things like that, which applies both to teens and to youth. I'm a big camp guy. I grew up going to camps as a kid. I grew up going through college. I worked at summer camps as like as a counselor and things like that. And then obviously as a youth leader for so many years, getting our kids to be able to take a week of their life and kind of be saturated in that sort of presence. It's like it's your retreats on steroids because instead of, 1 or 2 days or an overnight or whatever, it's a week long experience. But I recognize it is a massive sacrifice. It's a sacrifice of money. It's certainly a sacrifice of time. It's a sacrifice for my family. You add to a summer schedule. If especially for youth, if you've got like a missions trip also during a summer, and you've got camp time, and I used to kind of joke with a lot of my youth pastor friends, or after I was youth pastoring for a while, I would joke with a lot of young couples that are coming up through youth ministry. I'm like, don't get married in the summer. You'll never celebrate your anniversaries together. You'll always either be out of the country or at camp, or like get married in the winter sometime or in the late fall, because you'll never be home together. Unfortunately, my wife and we were married in July, and I feel like of my first maybe 10 anniversaries, I was out of the country on a missions trip somewhere. Um, but it's because I believed so much in the value of that time. So I guess all that to say is making it a priority to try to be available to go to those camps with your students. A camp is going to be valuable to your kid either way, but there's like a 10x multiplier when you or other of your leaders are able to go to camp with your students as well. It just is a fact. The incubator of the relationships and the time spent together at a camp like that is huge. And so all I have to say is if you're able, can figure it out, maybe you're bivocational and you got to take some vacation time to be able to go and do it. For my investment in the lives of students long term, it's a no-brainer to try to get present with my students at camp for sure. Um, yeah. So, I mean, as to kind of respond to let's talk about camp and VBS real quick before kind of talking about some other opportunities, because I think there's some things that we can start to pull out of that that's helpful for our local leaders. So, how do you look at volunteer recruiting? How do you look at how do you look at having making availability for volunteer staff or leaders to be present either at a VBS or even to be able to go to camp with your students? Are there some things that you have seen or learned or recommendations that you would have to help, whether they're the point leader in their youth group or a volunteer leader, to be able to get connected and plugged into these events?
What do you think, Josh? Do you want to take a stab at that in your own
Did
context?
you have much of a camp culture, Josh, where you guys were? I know you did lots of summer mission stuff.
Yeah, we did a lot of summer missions trips. We didn't do camps. I was actually planning my first camp this summer, with
That sounds
movement
right.
before I transitioned, which is weird because they're like, "Hey, are you still going to come for camp?" And I'm like, "Well, you know, that's a whole nother story." But so yeah, they're beginning a camp ministry. But I do agree with Professor Freeman, just the value of having that time with students. But the way we would do like the summer season at Lifehouse is like a lot of ministries shut down. Like some even stopped their services in the summertime, which I always thought that was weird. But
Hmm.
like we would do like a lot of intentional like small group time, like going to people's houses, going to the beach. We would do a lot of hangouts in the summer. And as far as like recruiting, that was always difficult just because a lot of the church kind of was always all over the place with vacations and things like that. Um, so the beginning of the school year was always our recruiting time, but that summer season was usually like smaller relationship building time, as well as like student internships. We
Hmm.
did a lot of student internships during the summer, preparing student leaders and new leaders to come into the ministry in the fall.
That's cool. I like that.
And I'm trying to think about like what I've seen. Uh, I've I've been to many VBSs and summer camps over the years, and I think I see a lot of like repeat adults coming summer after summer with the same church group.
Yeah.
And what those adults are is they're people that have like they have really bought into the summer camp, philosophy, and they love summer camp and they think it's just the best thing ever, and it really makes a difference in these kids' lives. So the I think the goal is finding those people in your congregation, like the people that it either already are bought in to the philosophy of church camp, or they're the type of person that can be, and you might just need to convince them and talk to them and maybe invite them to one, and then they see how it's life changing for them and their students,
Yeah.
and then they're gonna keep coming, like it's so it's like the hard work is done on the front end.
Yeah.
You're not going to have to keep recruiting them summer after summer because they're gonna go out and tell the world and bring youth to the camp as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I think as a leader, one of the things you can do to really bit to benefit and set up those your volunteer teams or whoever's going to camps or VBSs during the summer is to really help them recognize they're not just there as a chaperone, they're not just there as someone who's, keeping the law and keeping the rules in check, but like really help them understand the discipleship opportunities that are there. Because I've seen both. I've managed at camps and stuff here in New York for a while, and you can always find the counselor whose job is to make sure that everyone is doing what they're supposed to be doing. But there's very little grace and there's very little relationship development, I think some of that is just personality, but I think some of that too is like training and equipping and preparing your leaders for what could this look like to spend this week. Because honestly, I don't know that I could justify sending a volunteer leader for a week and them potentially taking off work for a week just to be a disciplinarian the whole week. Like there's no justification in my mind for their sacrifice of time and energy. But if it's like to really have an opportunity to share life with a student and get them away from their rhythms and routines long enough to have some deep conversations and take advantage of those times, then yeah, I think you can easily start to justify some of that, some of that time. Josh, I love some of the stuff that you were talking about as it relates to like kind of looking differently about how you guys did ministry, whether you took a break during the summer or not, but like thinking differently. I think that helps in a lot of ways. I think changing up the routine knocks kids out of routine. And so they start to think differently. And I would even make the argument that even in kids ministries changing that up, even if it's on your Sunday morning experience, right? Because we do recognize families are coming and going constantly during the summer. So maybe your typical Sunday morning whole group gathering experience could and maybe should look different on a Sunday morning. Maybe you do break up into some smaller groups. so that you can have some more intentional conversations, because sometimes it's smaller groups of kids that are there on a Sunday, and maybe it's a little more manageable for whatever your staff or team looks like in the morning. But I think that's even sometimes fun for the kids to change up that routine every now and again. I could make that argument for any season, really changing some things up so that it just feels different and looks different. But it's hard to, like, I've seen lots of people who are like, here's my big summer series that I'm going to do. And then you realize kids are there maybe 50% of the time for this big summer series. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with doing series and having big, but thinking differently about, what am I communicating? Is there going to potentially be a continuity issue if it requires building on each other from week to week, versus, okay, maybe this is my series, but if you missed last week, you can jump right in where we're at now. And and thinking critically about the content that you're communicating, and what scaffolding needs to take place so that a kid doesn't come in the middle of the summer and be like, I haven't been here for a couple of weeks, what in the world's going on here? So there again, I think it just kind of speaks to that being intentional piece, for sure.
Can I respond to
100%.
that?
Yeah, absolutely.
That just made me think of an idea that we did a few years ago at our church, and I was teaching the kids' church one Sunday morning, and I believe it was a summer date, if I'm not mistaken. But we took them outside, like, because
Yeah.
it's summer and it's warmer, and it changes it up. You're usually in the building throughout the year for a children's, Sunday teaching time. We took him outside to the big playground, and it was manageable because there's less kids than normal, right? You don't have as large of a crowd as you might have in, say, September. So we took him outside onto the playground. It's in a fenced in area, so they're safe. And we did, I think it was Daniel and his friends, like the fiery furnace, like Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. We did that Bible story, and I remember we had the kids act out the Bible story on the play set. So like the
Oh
play
yeah,
set
yeah.
was like Nebuchadnezzar's castle,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
they were like moving about on the play set, and pointing and acting out the parts of the story. And I think we even took a picture at the end of like everybody in their part, and you just kind of make it up on the fly, like the
Yeah, yeah.
dramatization of it. But it was fun. It was different.
Mhm.
It got them out of their regular routine, and it was warm and sunny, and everybody loves to go outside. So that just came to my mind as you were saying that.
Love that. No, that's great. I love that idea. And I think because I've got an education background, first of all, I love getting the whole body engaged in the learning process. And honestly, so many times these kids are, especially even in school, they're sitting at their desks and in their chair the whole time. And I recommend those sorts of fun things, thinking creatively throughout the whole school year. But yeah, certainly the summer provides some really cool opportunities for that. Another thought that I had as it relates to summer, and is thinking of creative ways to bring the whole family together, during the summer as well. I mean, I understand why we have segregated ministries for kids and youth and adults, and I think that I think you need those because you're learning at different levels. But then I think the summer provides a cool opportunity to do some stuff together as a whole family unit as well. And so thinking through what kind of events or activities can you have, even stuff as simple as, now there's some logistics you have to think through, but even stuff as simple as doing like a movie night at the church for the whole family to get together. We did one, which apparently if you do it outside, it's a whole separate set of rules, because if the public is invited to it, there's all kinds of like copyright things you got to go through. It's not a huge deal, but it's all doable. Look into that if you're going to host a movie somewhere at your church. But providing opportunities for your families to do something together. First of all, for the families that are home that would attend it, they love it because it's a night they don't have to plan something for, and their kids driving them crazy at home because we don't do anything and mom dad's working all day and I don't have time, so like having something for them to go to, whether it be a water battle of some sort or a movie night or a cookout even, are great opportunities to bring families together and share that experience together as well. I think it's a big win. We've a couple times we would have during the summer, we would have like parent versus teen, like volleyball or kickball or things like that. Which of course the teens don't bring their parents of the ones that they're going to be embarrassed by, but that's okay. We can put them at the grill. But finding opportunities to share Christian community, biblical community together as a whole family unit, I think models some really healthy things for our students as well. So that's another thought that I had, at taking advantage of those summers and people's availability sometimes during the summers. Joshua, one of the things that you had mentioned, and I think I know just a little bit of this from some conversations we've had over the semesters, had to do with missions opportunities, which tend to be summer. Talk to us a little bit about how you prioritize missions opportunities. And Jesse, while he's talking too, I've seen some people do some neat things, even with kids, even if it's not international missions. That I'm curious if you've got any experience that you can speak to that component as well during the summer.
Well, like my emphasis on missions predominantly came from last year. We did an essential series.
Mm,
And the essential series was like, what are the 5 things that we want students to hold near and dear in this ministry? And it was the word of God, worship, prayer, service, and giving. And that service piece, we looked at, and it was after the discipleship strategy and youth ministry course, where we looked at how do we get a student from first coming through the door to a fully formed disciple through high school. And one of the things that I wanted to see was missions trips,
mm,
getting a kid outside of their environment where they can then apply what they've been learning, sharing, and show the love of God with people far away from Jesus. My principle for missions trip is, as you behold, you become.
mm,
As we behold Christ. I love that text in 2 Corinthians 3:18, where it says, beholding as in the mirror the glory of the Lord, we are being transformed. So as
mm,
I serve, I'm being transformed. As I'm in my word, I'm being transformed. As I worship, I'm being transformed. As I give someone a cup of water in Jesus'
mm.
name, I'm becoming more like Jesus. So
Good.
those missions opportunities were opportunities for them to do, and as they're doing, they're becoming.
It's good.
Um, we like that was even sometimes more than our camps. Like the missions trips, we had more buy-in, like transformation stories, testimonials, from our missions trips more so, because these kids, they want to get their hands dirty, they want to
Mm,
do something. The days of like just building things and building events, those days are over, unfortunately. These kids, they want to actually get out and do something. So
mm,
just providing those opportunities for my students to get out and do the ministry, I think that was the biggest transformation moment. And then just seeing students give a week of their time in the summertime, that in itself was a sacrifice.
sure.
Um, and so, like, we always in our ministry, we looked at everything we do as, we're not doing ministry to students, we're doing ministry with students. So,
Love
like,
that.
all of our events, all of our programming, it was so we can all have a shared experience. As my students ask me questions, it pulls things out of me. So now we're growing together. It's not like you're just growing because you're doing something. I'm growing as I see you take steps of faith and as you do different things. So it was just a beautiful time that summer, those summer missions trips. Those are things that I'm really looking forward to implementing even this year in Shiloh. So
That's
um,
awesome.
really looking forward to that part. Yeah.
That's great. Thanks, Josh.
Yeah, and I'll add that, I mean, I'll ditto Josh. Like
Mhm.
it's I think especially for youth and teenagers, that is a really like critical time of their lives where it is super meaningful to have them get their hands dirty and go do something together and
Yeah.
in service to others, whether it be internationally or locally. You know, like a mission trip where you go outside of your city or staying locally in your city. And I think kids like 12 and under, they can participate in things like that too on their own level of that's commensurate with their age.
Sure.
And I recall one church I was at in Fort Wayne, Indiana, Blackhawk Ministries. This was 10 years ago, I think. And they had like a children's day of service in their local community. And I was out there to do my little juggling show like in the evening, but during on a Saturday. But during the day on Saturday, they had set aside the day as a children's day of service in their neighborhood, like the neighborhood that the church was in. And I was there with them during this day. like before my show. So I participated with them too, which was kind of fun. So like we all got like rakes and garden gloves and the little trash picker uppers, stuff like that, I think. And we went out, and these are just, like, kids from the church. They're going into the local neighborhood, and they're helping with light lawn work, right?
Yeah.
Picking up sticks, raking leaves, picking up trash, that kind of thing. And just showing the love of Jesus through a simple act of service like that to their own
Yeah.
neighbors. You can totally do that with kids. There's a million different ways and ideas that you can do that with kids. And I've heard of kids going on international missions trips as well. So not just locally, but internationally. And it done right, you can introduce kids to meaningful missions and outreach internationally too. So
Yeah,
just get your
absolutely.
passports for them. So
Another aspect of getting families together in the summer that I didn't speak on the mission trips piece. Last summer at Movement, we actually allowed parents to attend the missions trip with their students. And that was a beautiful piece to see, where you see
Yeah.
families going on a trip together, like
Yep.
the bonds. And because I know specifically one of my high schoolers went on a trip with his mom.
Yeah.
It was his right before he went to college. And those moments, just seeing the family together,
Sure.
serving and doing things together, I think even that added another layer of discipleship, another layer
Yeah.
of community. And then
That's right.
seeing other parents connect with other parents on the trip.
Yeah.
Talking about the kids and how frustrating they are. So it allowed them to have some sort of friendship when they got back home. Because a
Yeah, it's
lot of
awesome.
parents, they're lonely. They don't really have the friends that they need.
Mhm.
So being able to build relationship in the summertime at those little hangout spots or at those missions trips um allows them to have that community that they need in the school year to get through.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I couldn't agree anymore. And in fact, just this past February during our winter break up here, my wife and I were able to go to Colombia on a missions trip with our oldest daughter, and it was awesome. Like the amount of times I was able, because usually, as a former youth pastor or leader of those trips, I'm usually in the details, directing and correct, but I got to go just as a dad because I wasn't in charge, and like finding times to just kind of sit back and watch my daughter love people and point them to Jesus and represent Christ to them. It filled my heart so much. I absolutely loved it. So a quick aside, we're talking about the summer, but thinking of your like spring breaks and winter breaks and stuff like that is also a great time to recuperate some of those sorts of stuff. It was one of the things that we started doing because our summers were so crazy busy, and we would go to the National Youth Convention and Fine Arts Festival in the summer. So like once you start stacking camps and all that kind of stuff, so we were kind of reclaiming those winter breaks, which for us, we have winter break up in New York because it's so crazy up here. It was a great season to reclaim some time and do a cool mission trip. And then when you go back to school and your friends were like, "What'd you do during winter break?" And we were like, "We went to Colombia." It was awesome. They're like, "What?" And it was a cool opportunity to share some of that with their peers at school, which in the summer sometimes you don't get a chance to see them until a couple weeks later after a trip like that. So it was kind of neat to see some of that fruit immediately after. Anyways, back to talking about summers again. But a kid, Jesse, I think a really cool kids missions opportunity that our church did pretty regularly was connecting with a local retirement community. And I'll tell you what, man, just taking a group of kids over there with dry erase boards ready to play tic-tac-toe with the residents in the retirement community. Not only did it just bring joy to them to see these little kids, but like you almost see them like gaining their youthfulness back a little. There was a couple people, we did this just during the Christmas holiday break a couple months ago, and there were some ladies there that were like, I have not played tic tac toe in probably over 40 years, and they were loving it, absolutely loving it. And it was a smile, it was a relationship, it was a you're seen, you're cared for, which is one of the primary goals of missions. It's seeing sometimes an underserved population of people and saying God sees you, he loves you, he's got great things for your life, and you haven't been forgotten. And so that's an easy community connection piece as far as like taking an opportunity for missions and stuff like that. And another great opportunity to bring families along as well, bring the parents, let them have some conversations with other people, with the staff, that, you know, how many of the staff are blessed that somebody's there helping to interact and you know, share some life with them as well. So another cool kind of mission slash summer opportunity when you're thinking of kids ministries. Obviously it works with teenagers as well, but
I
play
love
bingo,
that.
bring
Yeah.
stuff for bingo. I
Yep.
mean, all that kind of stuff is super fun.
I was gonna say bingo. Like
Oh yeah.
you're so right. The retirement home outreach opportunity is so ripe, you know, for kids. And, you know, I did it when I was a children's pastor. We would do a Christmas play, you know, at the local retirement community. They love it. And it's what I love about it is that it doesn't take much. It doesn't have
Yep.
to be complicated. In fact, the more simple, the better. Like playing bingo, playing tic-tac-toe, showing off a children's play that honestly is really not that high tech. You know, but that's all you got to do. You got to show up and just
Yep.
let these elderly folks know that they're seen, that they
Yep.
matter, and you show them like children, and it just lights up their life because they see the future before them before they are leaving this world. You
That's
know,
great. That's
yeah.
great. Let me shift gears here a little bit in this topic, still thinking about the summer, but maybe now starting to think a different aspect of ministry as it relates to summer. And that is, I know for me in the rhythm of my ministry years, the summer was a big preparation for the fall, and the fall kind of being this big relaunch, so to speak, each year. And so I'd be curious to hear your guys' thoughts as it relates to did you agree? Did you find that rhythm? Did you find a little bit of that rhythm as well? And if so, what were some of the things that you started using that summer time for in preparation, whether it be with your staff or whether it be for ministry specific programming things? Kind of how did you use that incubator season of summer to launch into the, because most students, whether it's teenagers or elementary middle school age kids, like their lives revolve around the school's rhythms as well. And so usually for most churches and most kids ministries, next gen ministries, the summer is kind of, or the fall is kind of the big relaunch again. I'm curious some of your guys' thoughts there.
Go ahead, Josh.
Um, while I was at Movement, the summer was predominantly um geared to student development and leader development.
I love that. You were talking about internships and stuff during the summer. Can you unpack that a tiny bit too?
So our internship process was we would have students come to the church for about the literally the entire summer, that 2.5, 3 month period throughout the summer where they would learn, you know, calling, discipleship, you know, those basic leadership development pieces. Same thing with leaders. Because a lot of ministry it kind of slowed down where we weren't doing the bigger stuff. A lot of this, like we would still have our services, but they were a little bit more stripped down just because we knew a lot of people wouldn't be there. But that allowed us to go deeper in relationship, deeper in discipleship, deeper in formation. um and then the fall would be like, what are those three key events that we want to have to move students along? So the first, it will always be, we didn't do camp, we did mission trips, and then it would go into a fall retreat, and then it would go into the winter lock-in. And that winter lock-in was like that final charge, big pump up to finish the school year well.
Mhm.
That was our pretty much our model that we looked at. We had a lot of leadership trainings, a lot of leadership
Good.
formation, even retightening up our job descriptions, because as the leaders were developed, now they were, I wouldn't say they were going higher in the funnel, but they were actually taking on more responsibility. So now what does that look like for this year versus how your role looked at last year?
It's good.
In my current role, as youth pastor here, the student ministry only has, they haven't had a youth pastor for about 3 years.
Mm.
So they have once a month services. So starting this month in May, this will be our last month having only one service. Starting in June, we're going to go to every other Sunday. And then by the fall, that beginning of the school year, we're hoping to bring everybody back into building for Wednesday night Bible study. While the parents are in the main sanctuary, I'll have the students down at the chapel. Um, so we're looking at the summer. I have a 3-week or 6-week leader training plan throughout the summer to get the leaders deeper developed. Because a lot of them, they were just, while they didn't have a youth pastor, they were just doing stuff in ministry. They weren't really developing other leaders to do ministry with them because they had no one to pour into them. They really couldn't pour into anyone else.
Yeah.
So I'm looking at this summer as, again, leadership development, tightening those job descriptions, adding more space for student services, and then the fall would be like that kickoff of the year, and then see how that works, and then we'll readjust as we see fit.
That's great. No, I love that. Yeah, I would do we would have a staff retreat, and it was usually just an overnight, maybe just one night overnight, a day and a night and a day. And that staff leadership development time as we got ready to kick off the new year was a big deal for us as well. Yeah, it's good. What are your thoughts, Jesse?
Well, as you were talking, Joshua, about youth and leadership development, it made my brain go to a side note that's kind of related to all of this. But it was something that happened to me when I was in college. So I went away to college, like I went out of state to college. And I grew up in the church, so I was a part of my home church all through high school. And then I leave for college. But when I came home for the summers as a college student, like 1 or 2 of the summers, like my home church, like let me lead and teach the middle school ministry. And
That's
like
cool.
as a returning college student in the summers, it gave me something to do in the summertime, like that had purpose. They were taking advantage of me being home because they had they had the wacky schedule, but here I was, and I was able to serve in that manner. And I remember, like, I don't know, 10 years later, after I taught that middle school class, I ran into a guy who was a little bit younger than me, out in my city, and he was like, "Hey, I remember you. You were my middle school pastor back in 2001, and I was like, I remember your face, but he was telling me, like, just how much it meant to him, like just me being there for the summer for these middle schoolers, like, really meant a lot.
That's cool.
So I know this is kind of a side thought, but it's the thought of, like, taking advantage, not exploiting, but taking advantage
Yeah,
of your college students in your
good.
church that
Yeah,
are maybe home for the summer,
yeah,
and you want to give them an opportunity to serve in a meaningful way.
yeah.
Let them teach in the youth or children or middle school, and that
Yeah.
could be a good thing. But back to your original question, like for children's ministry, yeah, I think a lot of thought and planning does need to go into, like, during the summertime, go into that September inflooding of families and children, because they're going to come back, and they're going to come back in numbers, and you want to be ready for that, and you want to celebrate that, have a back to school
Yeah.
event, have a promotion Sunday, have a
That's good.
do something that celebrates and welcomes back everybody, and makes that September kickoff special, or middle August, depending on when the schools are getting back into session.
Yeah.
Um,
That's good.
yeah.
Which I think is a bigger deal at the elementary levels, obviously more so than at the high school levels, but those are big deals. Like, a lot of kids are changing school buildings, and you got new, big deal of having a new teacher, which, all of that sort of stuff, and celebrating the excitement of that and in the beginning of the new year. I think those are all things worth celebrating in the lives of kids. And so I'm a big fan of those things. When did you typically do your transition? Like, when was a kid that was transitioning from kids ministries transitioned up to youth ministry? That usually happens during the summertime somewhere as well. And what did that look like? And how were you guys intentional about that, about those transitions?
We started at when I was at Movement, we started our transition the Sunday after Easter. We will
Okay.
always do it after Easter. So then you had a good maybe about 6 to 8 weeks before they will actually be in the ministry, where we will have it will be myself, the campus director, and I would either have another adult leader, but mostly I will always bring students with me.
It's good. I love
That
that.
way, those fifth graders, they knew who their director would be. They would know a few leaders, and they would know a few students. And we would do that fifth grade life group during the main service for that 6 weeks. And then we would have at our block party, we had a end of the school year block party, where we have bounce houses, food, games. We would do a gospel presentation, but that was more so just for kids to come out, have fun in the school year. Let's just have a lot of fun in a Christian manner. And that was the first event that we would allow our fifth graders to come to.
Mm.
And after our block party, then they would transition into the ministry. But not to backtrack, but during that summer season, we will also specifically train leaders and students through discipleship and mentoring and those connect groups in the summertime, because we look at the fall as the start of that 9-month mission field for our students,
Yeah.
sending them back into their schools with specific tasks. So once September starts, we have what we call our challenge series. So each series, students are challenged to do reading the Bible plan, inviting their friends, sharing their faith, memorizing scripture, and whatever life groups accumulate the most points over that series, then that life group gets to go out and do something fun up to $500.
Nice.
No longer were we just planning we don't really have events in the fall too much, but for them to do something fun, we have these specific things that we would like you guys to do. And then it challenges them to get into their word, to share their faith with their friends. And then in the fall, we would have like weekend seminars on how to share your faith and things like that for parents. But all that stuff started in the summertime. We would bake that into the culture for the students that were there. Usually they were the most plugged in kids. Sometimes they were the awkward ones or the ones, but they were the ones that were there, and we can pour into them. I mean, we can get 5, 6 kids and then send them back into the schools in the fall. That was like a game changer.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
again, with those transitions, summertime, all throughout the after Easter, we would do our transition period. And that's something I want to implement here. Because right now, one thing I learned is with them not having a youth pastor, a lot of the fifth, sixth, and a lot of the middle school students have been in kids ministry. A lot of them haven't even gone down to the youth ministry. So really trying to look at this summer as how can I engage those middle schoolers and bring them over into where they can be. And splitting the ministry, because a lot of the connect groups right now in student ministry, they'll have middle school girls and middle school and high school girls all together. And knowing like phases, I love how Orange talks about phases. Like middle schoolers think differently than high schoolers. That was one of the things I love about Orange was
Yeah.
they think differently and how to engage the student exactly where they are. A lot of those processes and strategy, a lot of that begins in my summertime planning. And then the fall, that is the launch, but it's the challenge. For me, it's always going to be a challenge. I love fun, but I don't give them things anymore. I make them work for it. Yeah,
That's good. That's good. Yeah.
And now I'll add to that, Joshua. I like the idea of promoting them earlier than later. Yeah, like if you ask a
They
random
need to know.
yeah, if you ask a random kid in the summertime, like who just finished fifth grade, like if you ask him in July, like, hey, what grade are you in? They're not going to say I just finished fifth grade. They're going to say I'm a rising sixth grader, right?
Yeah.
Like they want to move up as soon as possible. Like
Yeah,
we
yeah.
and
yeah.
we don't want to make them feel like they're still a fifth grader in like August, right?
No.
Like after they finish fifth grade. I mean, some churches might do that, and I guess if you have a consistent system and you do promote them in September, I mean, I think that can work. But I like the idea of empowering them with that status, as soon as you can, that like reasonably so, like Easter is great, or or the few months following Easter, that kind of thing. Yeah.
Because it's different going from kids ministry, with the palm trees and all the dances and the motions, and you go into youth and it's like, what is this? It could be very overwhelming for a middle
Yeah.
school just
Yeah.
coming into space. It's darker, the smoke, and it's just different.
I remember once we have Royal Rangers at our church, and I remember this is a while ago now, but I remember hearing a Royal Ranger telling a boy that was about to come up to the youth group. He was trying to convince him to stay in Rangers longer. He's like, all they do is it's like church service up there. I'm like, first of all, he has no idea what we're doing up there. But the idea of it's a little bit of a shock to the system. Not only is it super intimidating to walk into a youth group, whether you're a fifth or sixth grader or seventh grader, depending on when you're your youth group is transitioning, which is also, Josh, why I love that you said you would bring students along with that from the youth group with that transition. So there's some familiar faces and some people that they know when they come in. I'll just close with this idea real quick as we're getting ready to wrap up here. But one of the things I would do with our teenagers right at the end of the school year is we would do a youth group prom. It was primarily an opportunity for kids to wear their prom dresses that they spent a ridiculous amount of money for to wear once. The parents loved it because they got another opportunity to wear it again. But it was just a fun end of the year party. And every year I picked like a cheesy prom theme. So it was like Under the Sea or A Night in, all the fun cheesy things. And you know, for a lot of our kids who didn't get a chance to do those sorts of things, I don't know how your churches feel about dancing. It wasn't a big deal for us. Anyways, but that was also one of the first events that we started inviting, because it was such a fun event that we would invite some of those kids in our transition to. That was kind of like the big event that they looked forward to coming to. It was food and dancing and fun and games and stuff like that. But it was a fun kind of double dipping event for us for sure.
I have a question about that.
Yeah.
What age did you do that at?
For the prom?
Yeah.
So our youth ministry started at 7th grade. So 7th grade through high school.
Okay.
So yeah, so the kids that were coming in, they were the little 7th graders. You didn't have to dress up, but there were plenty of people who chose to do so. And
would they like pair up in dates, or was it just everybody just kind of come and have a good
100%? Everybody just kind of came. Yeah,
had
yeah.
a good time.
We certainly weren't doing promposals and stuff like that. It was just we just called it. Our youth group was called Remnant, so we just called it the Remnant Prom. But
Nice.
yeah, they all came. They came. So everybody came solo.
Yeah, that's cool. That's a neat idea.
Yeah, that was fun. Lots of balloon creations during those seasons as well. Anybody have any final thoughts as it relates to summer? Something that we didn't address that you're like, oh, here's one last good idea. Make sure that I get this out before we bring this to a close.
This is good. Good stuff. I wonder if I have it on my shelf. It's somewhere. I have a book about camp ministry. We have a class about camp ministry at Ascent College. So if anyone's listening and wants to take our class at Ascent College, it is called Camp Ministry, and I'm looking for the textbook for it, or one of them. Here we go. It's called Sacred Playgrounds by Jacob Sorensen, and it's Christian summer camp in theological perspective. Really, really good like stuff. Like he does research on like Christian camps and finds like all the themes that kind of like why we do Christian camp, why students come, what are helping camps themselves like grow their ministries and focus on what is the most important stuff, that kind of thing. So
very cool. That's awesome. I got to check that book out. That sounds really, I love that. What a cool focus for a piece of literature. Love that. Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much for your time. We appreciate it. And hopefully this is useful to anybody that stumbles upon it and engages in the content. But all that to say is have a great summer as it's getting ready to come up here. Hopefully all of our Ascent College students finished strong and well. I know Josh is working on his final paper, I'm sure, as we speak.
Yes, literally. I was literally doing it as we were got the reminder. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much for your input and your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Mark. See you, Joshua.
Bye-bye.